Hey everyone, Brian here, and holy cow, the little set of backwater colonies in the boondocks of America have just brought the world's most formidable military power to its knees. British colonial America is now the United States of America. Hooray! Since we threw off British governance, for obvious reasons, we needed to create our own. So, what do we need? Well, we don't want one single leader, that's for sure, so no kings. We also don't want anyone making decisions for us without our consent, so votes need to be counted equally, and any cooperation between governments has to be unanimous. We also don't want to be taxed without our consent, so only states can tax, and that money is used for the state. And if any of us need help, we all have to get together and decide to help, also unanimously. All set? All right, self-government, baby, yeah! While we roll the intro, head to your lesson guide and take a look at the preview activity. Discuss some possible shortcomings to the scenario you just heard about, and let's talk about governing the newly created United States of America. While the idea of a very limited federal government was completely understandable, they did just fight a war to get away from the opposite, the newly minted United States of America were anything but united. In 1781, the Articles of Confederation came into force as the USA's first form of government. However, as you may have predicted in your lesson guide, there were a couple of issues. Today, let's find answers for these essential questions. What were the Articles of Confederation? How did the weaknesses of the Articles lead to the creation of the Constitution? What did it take for the new government to be agreed upon? How was the new government organized? And a big picture question to ponder, can you infer the effects of a change in government on individuals? Pulling from the most independent of Enlightenment thought, natural rights, religious tolerance, and definitely individual freedom, the Articles of Confederation left all 13 states with incredible power to run their own affairs. From elections to taxation to regulating trade, all were driven by the state governments. As the states had all this power, obviously the loosely organized federal government had none of that. There was no chief, no centralized judicial system, and Congress, or a meeting of all the states, could only happen for one of a few reasons. They could declare war, they could coin money, they could enter into treaties with other countries, and they could pass federal laws. While it kinda sounds like the Congress you or I would know, there were a couple of pretty stark differences. Each state had one vote, and any federal law had to be passed by 9 of the 13 states. As the states were pretty different places with different ideas, they didn't often agree on things. This made pretty much any decision next to impossible to pass. However, there's a bigger problem we should address. The Articles gave no authority to Congress to pass taxes. They had to ask for contributions from the states to pay debts. After having just fought a very long and very expensive revolution, the federal government had a huge debt burden, which they could do basically nothing about. Additionally, most of the soldiers who fought in that war were owed months, if not years, of promised pay, which again, no taxes, no money. And additionally, you have the issue of rich states such as Virginia and New York and poor states such as Georgia, which were all attempting to create their own money and started to slap other states with tariffs or charges on goods sold from one state to another to deal with their own debts. Oh, one more thing Congress couldn't control: interstate commerce, or the movement of goods from one state or country to another. They couldn't stop any state from doing, well, basically anything. Riots had begun to break out over taxes. People had begun to question whether or not the revolution was a good thing. Something had to be done. Pause here and head to your lesson guide. Knowing what you know about the Articles of Confederation, how would you fix them? Propose 3 possible fixes. From the debt to the taxes, from the soldiers to the riots, and overall the general lack of ability to do anything, a convention was called in 1787 to revise the Articles of Confederation. The key word is revise. A majority of the representatives from the states came under the assumption that a few tweaks were necessary, but that the government would stay essentially the same. However, James Madison of Virginia and Alexander Hamilton of New York, among others, came with the intention of creating a completely new framework. The big questions facing them were all of the weaknesses of the Articles, including taxes, representation, commerce, and whether or not to have a chief executive. Over 4 months, a new government took shape. This government would have more authority than the states over many issues. It would have a representative body with more representation. It would have a system of judges for handling disputes. It would have a federal system of banks and taxes, and it would have a chief executive. Wait a minute, said many representatives. Are you trying to create an oppressive monarchy like the one we just left? How are we going to guarantee that you won't just take everything away again? It was for this reason that the Bill of Rights was included. The first 10 amendments or additions to the Constitution. Based upon the freedoms of Locke, Rousseau, and Montesquieu, the Bill of Rights enumerated or spelled out things that the new federal government couldn't infringe upon. Now remember, 55 guys showed up in Philadelphia to revise the Articles of Confederation and instead went back home to sell the idea of a whole new government. After the document, called the Constitution, was signed in 1787, it next had to be ratified or agreed to by 9 of the 13 states. And so delegates took to the social media of the day, the newspapers. Print was huge in the new states and had been a driving force for communicating ideas during the Revolution as well. Now it would be used to push a different revolution. And from this came the Federalist Papers, among the most important documents in the history of the United States, as it was in these arguments run throughout the state's newspapers that the delegates of the Constitutional Convention laid out their support or reservations for the new government. Known as Federalists, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay wrote articles in defense of the Constitution. Those who were critical of the new framework were known as Anti-Federalists. Whoever was writing and whatever their point, the argument for a new way of government was in the public for everyone to read, think, argue, and contemplate over. The Federalists broadly believed that a stronger central government would solve many of the problems that the Articles had caused. The Anti-Federalists had problems with, well, almost everything in the new Constitution. Their main point, however, was that a strong government would have the power to inflict the same unjust actions that the British had. No thank you, said the Anti-Federalists. Pause here, head to your lesson guide, and briefly jot down a couple of thoughts on why it's so important to know the reasons behind those who agreed or disagreed with the new Constitution. The Constitution became the law of the land in 1787, with Delaware being the 9th state to ratify. As you may suspect, most of the new structure was a direct reaction to the weaknesses of the Articles. But as a direct reaction to the distrust of giving any one person or branch too much power, the delegates created a system of checks and balances, or limitations. The legislative branch was bicameral, or composed of 2 bodies, the House of Representatives, which was based on population, and the Senate, where each state had 2 delegates. Either branch could create and pass legislation, pass new taxes, regulate interstate commerce, and any other issue not directly given to the states. Both branches then had to agree to the law. This legislation had to be passed by a majority, but could still be vetoed or killed by the executive branch. This branch was led by a president, an elected official with a term limit. This branch's job was to carry out the law. Both of these branches could be checked by a Supreme Court, which would review laws or statutes brought to them in order to make sure that they did not violate the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. This Constitution, the longest-running democratic foundational document in the world, has been altered, changed, copied, and frequently fought over, but as of now inspires hope for a continued democratic future. So, what do you think of the delegates' solution to their issues with the Articles of Confederation? Do you see any possible issues in the future? Jot down an answer in your lesson guide. From a fraught beginning to a revolutionary new form of government, the United States of America has had an interesting ride, and we're not even past the first decade yet. Check out the extension activity to go deeper with the Federalist and Anti-Federalist arguments, and prepare yourself for more because history is everywhere.